people are still joining, but I think we'll get going if that's all right. It's 11 o'clock. So this week's guest is Eileen Fargus, who's the new manager of Ecofin US Renewables Infrastructure. And so I think that's quite an interesting time to find out what's been happening with that fund. And hopefully we can try and get the discount down. I've got a few bits of news just to run through quickly first. Again, there's still nothing particularly monumental going on. But nevertheless, there is an interesting deal, I think, partly because we've got two separate funds participating in it, between JLEN and HydrogenOne. US Solar Fund's made an announcement, and Henderson Eurotrust, there was obviously something going on there that we probably should mention. JLEN and HydrogenOne first. So they are investing in the same green hydrogen project, which is in Germany, down in Saxony, and it's being developed by a company called HH2E, which is a German business that both of these, both HydrogenOne and Foresight have backed. Obviously, JLEN is part of the Foresight stable. So JLEN is buying a third stake in a kind of holding company called Foresight Hydrogen Holdco, and paying 5.7 million euros for that. And then that in turn is going to own 3/4 of the project in Germany. So in other words, JLEN is going to end with about 25% stake in the project on a look-through basis. But it also actually has some exposure through Foresight Energy Infrastructure Partners, FEIP. That's one of their thing. So because it's got an investment in that, and FEIP is another partner. So there we go. And so they're investing in the project, but they're also already invested in the developer HH2E as well. And so is HydrogenOne. So they've got a €6 million stake they made in that, I think back in May last year. And they're investing about 2.8 million euros into Tierback. So this is going to be a 100 megawatt hydrogen plant, which can produce about 6,000 tons of hydrogen annually by 2025, which is when they hope to get it sort of up and running properly. I think they hope to open it in 2024, but 25, I think, is when it's going to be sort of running at full scale. But there is the potential, so HH2E say, to actually scale the plant tenfold to be a gigawatt, so 60,000 tons by 2030, so not that far off. And that would save 800,000 tons of carbon dioxide being emitted every year. That is a significant amount, really. And as we'll discuss in a second, hydrogen, the hydrogen already is one of the big polluters. And so trying to move that to a kind of green basis can make quite a big difference. H2E has already got a plant that's under construction up on the north of Germany on the Baltic coast. And it's identical technology to this one, so that we can sort of read across from what's going on there. And the price tag for that whole project is said to be about 200 million euros, which would increase to about 1 billion to get this sort of tenfold expansion. So basically 5-for-1 on your money, but 10-for-1 on the size, which sounds like it makes sense. But obviously, given what we've seen about the amounts of money being invested by people like JLEN and HydrogenOne, I'm guessing that they are paying for equity stakes, and then there is other finance coming behind that. So that's something we're going to have to dig down into. So next time we see either one of JLEN or HydrogenOne, we'll try and find out what the detail is on that. HH2E is aiming to have 4 gigawatts of plant by 2030, which would produce about 240,000 tons. To give you an idea, when Ineos, who's one of the big producers in the UK, backed HydrogenOne, they were the big industrial investor in HydrogenOne when that IPO'd. They, I think, had somewhere between 300,000 and 400,000 tons of output. So HH2E on that scale would be pretty significant. But that presumably would be across 4 or 5 sites. And actually, they say they've got 15 suitable sites in Germany. So I think it's just all about how much money they can gather to actually hit these targets. And interestingly, the biggest facility in Europe currently being built is one in the Netherlands, done by Shell. And that capacity for that is only 22,000 tons. So we're seeing actually something really quite significant here. And I think this is a big step forward that we are actually seeing these plants being built. There's been a lot of talk for a long time, but now it seems to be happening. Uses of hydrogen, I've pulled various charts from various places, but heating is one. Direct injection to the gas grid to reduce the amount of natural gas being burnt and put hydrogen in instead. And that's part of the rationale for Pantheon Infrastructure's investment in the UK National Grid gas transmission system. So it's made quite a big investment in that, and it thinks that there will be money being spent on upgrading that to handle the hydrogen input, and there's return to be earned on that. So that's obviously something that they're quite keen on. Transport, cars is probably not a runner, although I think it is being done already in some limited circumstances. It makes more sense in larger vehicles, so things like buses and trains and trucks, and also perhaps ships and planes, but more likely is to turn it into something else, take the hydrogen and turn it into something else like ammonia or methanol, and use that to fuel the ships and the planes. So that's a potential use as well. But probably the big one, I think, well, apart from transport, which is a maybe, the big one is probably in industry. So things like producing steel, things like producing chemicals, any kind of heavy user of energy currently could be powered by hydrogen. And that could be really quite big. In terms of the different types, so at the moment, most of the hydrogen that we've got is grey. There's also black hydrogen we'll find in a second, but basically that's produced by coal, but this is produced by natural gas. If you try and capture the carbon dioxide emitted in that process, then that becomes blue hydrogen, and there are a couple of plants being done on that basis. I think that's definitely an intermediate step. It doesn't really make sense as a long term. The more likely thing is that we're running this sort of wholesale shift over towards kind of green hydrogen production, which is basically using power generated by renewable energy to turn water through electrolysis into hydrogen and do it that way. There are other methods that might come along as well, but this seems to be the most sensible one. In terms of, the slide comes from HydrogenOne. So they're saying this is what's being produced currently. They say 70 million tons, but I've read somewhere else about 75 million tons of hydrogen being produced annually at the moment. Most of that is coming from gas, but a lot of it's coming from oil. And also a big chunk from coal, which is just the worst sort. I think there's even, you get from lignite as well. Really, all of this stuff has to go and be replaced by the electrolysis. So you can see the scale of the ambition here. And the estimation is that you need to invest about $700 billion to achieve a lot of that by 2030. I don't think that would have done all of it. Why the HH2 plants are interesting is because they're powered from renewables, as we said, but they're using battery storage technology, so they don't need to take renewable power constantly to deliver 24/7 hydrogen output. So they're going to be incorporating a 200 megawatt battery into the plant alongside a 50 megawatt electrolyzer. 200 megawatt battery is the same size as Harmony Energy Income's Pillswood plant, which is the biggest one in the UK at the moment. So in a sense, it's a really significant battery. But nevertheless, because they'll be able to use that, they'll be able to just take power when it's at the cheapest, so when it's being produced but not really being used, and then use that, store it, release it when they gradually through the day, and power the plant that way. And obviously that reduces the energy bill considerably, because that's the biggest input into the cost of doing this once you've built the plant. So that will make quite a big difference. And I think there's a sort of general trend here that we get more and more and more renewable capacity put onto the grids in, around the world. And there will be more of these peaks and troughs in terms of production demand. It's part of the reason why there's so much being invested in battery storage, but hydrogen is another good way of using that excess power when it is being generated. So, interesting stuff. Looking quickly at US solar, I thought we just chuck this in here because obviously we're talking to Eileen now, and US solar is the main competitor for renewables infrastructure at the moment. But it's obviously and that's a strategic review, and may end up getting sold off. And I think the interesting thing here was that it had this big solar project, Mount Signal, which was a 50-50 joint venture. and its venture partner has agreed to buy it out at NAV, more or less. And I think that just underpins the valuation on these things. As I mentioned already, that Ecofin US Renewables is trading on a discount of about 13. I think it just emphasizes how daft that is, given that you can actually sell the assets for the NAV. So it wasn't a bad investment for US Solar, and it's very frustrating to me that they've decided to shut down. I still don't really understand it, but there we go. And then lastly from me, before I wrap up, we did put a story up about the Henderson Eurotrust and this insider trading scandal. So there's 5 people here who have been accused by the FCA of insider dealing over quite a period. They seem to have mainly sold things that were going down using CFDs, so they kind of amplified the returns that way. And the FCA reckons doing that, they made about £1.5 million. They're also charged with money laundering offences as well. So if they get convicted, this is all quite serious. Having said that, even though this chap was a sort of named analyst working on Henderson Eurotrust, so actually my colleague brought it to my attention because he's written about him in a report. There's no suggestion that the trust was making money out of doing this stuff. In fact, well, I'm pretty sure Henderson Eurotrust doesn't sell short things anyway. And actually, James Henderson cooperated with all of this. So it's just interesting because we were doing our compliance training this week, and literally while that was happening, this was being announced by the FCA. So there's a little bit of excitement in the sector, but actually probably no read across to James Henderson or to Henderson Eurotrust, just to emphasise that. So that's enough from me. We're now going to talk to Eileen. Just before we do that, just this one question here. So could industry use batteries in this way? Why does this need to be limited in hydrogen? But I think we're talking here about arbitrage. Gresham House and Harmony Energy Income is that they are arbitraging the intraday power prices. And actually, it was a good example on Harmony Energy Income's last announcement, where they said that they bought power on one day in December at minus £50 a megawatt, or euros. I think it's £50 a megawatt. And at one point, the power price hit £2,500 a megawatt, just straight extreme volatility, just depending on whether renewables are generating or not and where the demand is. So you can get these massive kind of instability in supply and demand, which you want to smooth out by doing long-term power purchase agreements, which is what Ecofin Renewables Infrastructure does.